Think about how we first learn a language. We start by learning the letters of the alphabet, and then we figure out how to combine those letters into words. And eventually we get to the point where we can use those words to create and form sentences. After enough time and practice at doing this, we become quite fluent and we become so good at it that we are able to communicate effortlessly. Well, in music, this kind of works in a similar way. We have the notes that are like letters in the language. We have the scales and the triad shapes and stuff like that that are kind of like words of our language. And then the phrases that we play with all those scales and triads and stuff like that, they're kind of like the sentences that we use in the language. Well, the thing is, when we're using a language and learning it, if you don't understand the alphabet, the letters that come from the alphabet, it's going to become very difficult to start using those words and those words in sentences. The thing is, the major scale for music and the guitar is kind of like the alphabet, is where all our letters come from. Yet, the thing is, many intermediate guitarists, we struggle with playing this major scale across the entire neck. So that's what we're going to fix today. Today, we're going to take a deep dive into the 3 note per string major scale system, and we're going to show you the best ways to learn and practice this across the neck. And most importantly, we're going to look at how we can actually make some music with this scale system as well. On YouTube, there's a lot of information out there, and this is both a blessing and a curse. Because while there are a lot of things to learn from, sometimes we just have too much opportunities and it kind of paralyzes us. We end up learning nothing because there's so much available to us. This is kind of like if you try to learn a language by only reading words in the dictionary. Like, sure, all the words in that dictionary are correct, but there's no kind of cohesive structure or way to organize all these things into something that makes sense. The reason I bring up that analogy is because it's only once I learned the major scale across the entire fretboard that learning from YouTube and all other sources for the guitar became so much easier. Like, suddenly all these like new licks that I found, all these new chord shapes, I could learn them much faster, and I could also keep them and play them in any key whatsoever because I understood how it related to the major scale. And again, these shapes are quite easy to transpose, so I could transpose it to any key whatsoever. The reason I bring this up is because if you feel like you're one of those intermediate players that hops from video to video with the desire to kind of learn something new, but you find yourself learning something and then eventually it kind of just goes in one ear and out the other, it might be because you don't have a proper foundation in your guitar playing yet. And personally, this major scale foundation has been the best foundation for my guitar playing as well. So in the long run, after learning this system, it becomes so much easier to learn new things. But I think we understand that we need a foundation in our guitar playing for everything else to kind of sit on top of. But why specifically does that foundation need to be the major scale? The reason the major scale is the foundation is because the songs that we like to listen to, the songs that we want to be able to play, the songs that sound nice to our ear, they're inside of a key signature. And that key signature comes from the major scale. The key signature shows us what notes we're allowed to play, what chords we can use, and how to combine them all together to sound quite nice. And again, the key signature is using the framework of a major scale. So if you want to sound melodic at all, if you want to sound musical on the instrument and the fretboard, you need to understand how everything relates to your key signature. And to understand how things relate to the key signature, you have to learn the major scale across the fretboard. So we're going to figure out the best ways to learn and also practice these scale shapes so we can get them underneath our fingers first. And then we're going to look at ways we can make music with both the chords inside our key signature and also the pentatonics that we already know how to play. You don't have to abandon your pentatonics when learning the major scale. They are both connected to each other. So this 3 note per string major scale system, it gives us 7 different positions to play the major scale all the way across the fretboard. Each of these 7 positions starts from the root note of one of the 7 chords in your diatonic key signature. Now, to show you how this works, first we're going to look at the whole half step formula to just create a major scale on just one string. So I'm sure many of us already know about the whole half kind of formula thing. So let's play the key of G major on just one string. We'll play the G major scale. So we do like... So I'm sure many of us know the formula to like create a major scale on just one string. And again, on each of these notes in that major scale, we can harmonize those notes into chords of our key signature. So the first note is going to be the 1 chord, the second note is going to be the 2 chord, third note, 3 chord, 4 chord, and so on, and so on, and so on. What's cool about the 3-note per string system is that it ties all of this information together, and the scale positions that we learn, they start from each of these notes of these chords and notes inside of our major scale. So let's look at position 1. So again, the first note of G major is going to be G. Again, the first chord is going to be this G major as well over here. And we have the first scale position of our 3-note per string system that looks like this. Again, all the diagrams that you see on my screen, you can download them for free and practice them in your own time by checking out my school community. There is a link to join in the description. So we have the very first scale position that looks like this. And again, the second position in the key of G major starts from the second note, which is going to be A. And again, the second note can be harmonized into an A minor chord. And the second scale position looks like this. Now, the third scale position starts from the third note in the key of G, which is going to be B. That third note can be harmonized into the 3 chord, which is B minor. And the third scale position looks like this. Now, the fourth position starts from the 4th note, which is going to be the note C in the key of G major. And again, the 4th note can be harmonized into the 4 chord, which is going to be C major. And again, the 4th scale position looks like this. Now we have the 5th scale position, which you probably guessed it already, is going to start from the 5th note in the key of G major. And that's going to be harmonized into the chord D major. And the 5th scale position looks like this. Now the 6th scale position starts from the 6th note in the key of G major, which is going to be E. We can harmonize that into E minor, and the 6th scale position looks like this. Finally, our 7th scale position comes from that final note in our key, which is going to be the note F sharp in the key of G major. That can be harmonized into an F sharp diminished chord, and we have the 7th position that looks like this. The thing is, if you want to play in minor scales as well, you don't have to learn a whole new scale system. If you understand relative major and minor keys, we can reuse these exact same scale shapes for a minor key. So we know that every major key has a relative minor. In the key of G major, our relative minor is going to be E minor. Now that is the 6th chord of our key, so we just go to the 6th scale position to play in the minor key. So now we can play in E minor by using the exact same scale shapes, right? We don't have to learn all these new scale shapes for minor keys. These can be reused for both major and minor keys. Again, both relative major and minor keys, they're using the same 7 notes, the same 7 chords, so you can also use those same exact 7 scale positions for both your relative major and minor key. Now, it's going to be very, very difficult to learn and memorize all 7 of these scale positions just by kind of looking at that video and the diagrams on there and kind of rewinding things and practicing them one by one in your own time. So what is the best and most efficient way to learn these scale patterns and get them underneath your fingers? The key is chipping away at them one step at a time and then doing this exercise to kind of reinforce what we already learned. So how are we supposed to go about learning this system? We're just going to start with position 1. Just practice it slowly until you can play it very comfortably without making a mistake. And again, practice going in reverse as well. Now, you don't want to rush this process. You want to go as slow as you have to without making a mistake. It's better to go slow and play it properly than rush it and play it fast for the sake of just getting to the end of the scale as soon as possible, right? You want to be able to play this without making a mistake. So do that with position 1 first. That might take you some time. There's nothing wrong with that, okay? Just take your time to get it right first. So once you're comfortable with position 1, then do the exact same thing for position 2. Just play it slowly until you can hit every single fret without making a mistake. And again, go in reverse with it. The thing is, you might think from here, alright, we're supposed to go to position 3 now, right? No, right? Sometimes when we learn too many shapes, like one just goes in one ear and out the other, we end up forgetting all the other things that came before it. So we need to find a way to reinforce what we already just learned. So we're going to practice this exercise to flow between these two shapes. So we're going to go up position 1 until we reach the highest note, which is right over here. That's the highest note of position 1. And then we're going to slide into the highest note of position 2 and go backwards. And suddenly this kind of combines both of the shapes into one exercise. So instead of like remembering them as separate things, they now become one thing. And again, you want to get to the point where you can practice looping this round quite comfortably. So once you get good at flowing between position 1 and 2, then we can think about starting to learn position 3. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to start again from scratch with position 3. Just be slow with practicing the scale. Get to the point where you can play it without making any mistakes. Again, this is going to take some time. There's nothing wrong with that, right? But once we can do that with just position 3, we're going to combine it with position 2 again and practice that exercise, right? So we're going to go up position 2 until we reach that highest note. And then we're going to slide into the highest note of position 3 and go backwards. And again, you can keep looping that round until you're comfortable with that. The thing is, from here, now we can combine 3 positions together instead of having like these 2 separate chunks. So we can combine all 3 into kind of one shape of information, which means there's kind of like less chances for us to forget. Now, again, this might not be easy at the beginning, but as you practice this over time, you get better and better at it, right? So this is what we want to do. Practice shape 1 till we get to the highest note. Slide into the highest note of position 2. Go backwards. Now we're at the lowest note of position 2, and we can slide into the lowest note of position 3. And now we can kind of flow between all of them, right? And suddenly I've covered, like, look how much of the fretboard I've covered here. I've gone from the 3rd fret of the low E string to like the 12th fret of the high E in just 3 shapes. Suddenly I've got a massive chunk of the fretboard mapped out now because I've combined all of those shapes together. So this is the process you want to do. Start by learning a shape, then combine it with the shape next to each other, right next door. Then start learning the shape above that and then combine it with the 2 that you just learned. So there you've got like position 1, 2 and 3 mapped out. Then start learning position 4 in isolation. Then combine it with 1, 2, 3 and 4. Then once you've got all those combined, you can combine it with position 5 and so on and so on. Eventually you're going to get to the point where you can flow between all of those positions just like this. So again, it's all about learning just position by position at a time, and then figuring out ways to combine them together into bigger chunks, so there's kind of like less individual bits to remember. So again, learn position 1, then learn position 2, then combine them into one bigger position, then learn position 3, and then combine that with position 1 and 2 into one bigger position, and then learn position 4, and then combine that into 1, 2, and 3 to make that into an even bigger position, and so on for every single shape, until you can combine all of them and flow through every single shape up the entire neck of the guitar and up all the octaves. You can also try this exercise as well to help your fingers understand the patterns between each fret on all the different positions. It might seem like there's a lot of work between all 7 positions, and it might seem like at first glance they're all kind of random different shapes. There's actually a lot of repeating patterns that occur across all the positions. So we should try this exercise as well once we can connect at least 3 positions next to each other together. So what we're going to do, we're going to play 2 strings at a time. So we're going to go through positions 1, 2, and 3 on just the E and the A string. So we have like this over here on position 1, and then position 2 over here like this, and then position 3 over here like this. But instead of going all the way up the neck this way now, we're going to go down to position 1 and go from the A and the D strings now. And then position 2, and then position 3. And again, instead of going all the way up the neck, we're going to go back to position 1 on the D and the G string now. And then position 2, and position 3. And again, instead of going all the way up the neck, go down to the G and the B string now. And again, instead of going all the way up, we're going to go down to the B and the high E string on position 1, position 2, position 3. And again, this is going to help you build some more fluency with these scale patterns. You're kind of going to see where strings pair with each other, and like you're going to see some repeating patterns on like the stretches your hands have to make. Like for example, over here, like we have this kind of like big stretch over here between quite a few strings that repeats themselves in many different places. You kind of see like the diagonal pattern of how these go up the octaves. So this is a really good exercise to gain a new perspective on how to understand and visualize these scale shapes across the fretboard as well. Again, the key to learning and practicing these exercises, you got to branch out slowly. I know it is difficult to learn the entire system. It's not easy, it's not something you can do in one day, but just because it might be difficult at the beginning, that doesn't mean that you should give up on it now. Again, this is going to be well worth the reward you get from your playing, from being able to understand a lot more information on the guitar and apply it to the neck a lot easier, and also transpose it to any key from understanding how to play these major scales across the fretboard. Again, it's going to give your guitar playing a foundational layer in which you can build so much more on top of. So now that we've practiced some of these scale positions, eventually over time we're going to get better at memorizing them and being able to play them across the fretboard. What are we supposed to do to find music inside of these scale shapes? Again, there's no point practicing anything if it doesn't translate into anything that sounds good. So let's look at where we can find some music inside of this, right? So again, we go to position 1 over here, and that's kind of like built from this kind of G major bar chord that's around that same position as well over there. But the thing is, if we go to the string right underneath it on the A string, we also can find a place to find another chord inside of our key signature. So we have the 1 chord over here, but we also have the 4 chord right underneath it as well. So we have C major and G major attached to each other right there as well. And again, these like relationships between like the 1 and the 4 and the distance, this is completely transposable. So if I was in the key of like, let's pick the key of B major, I have my 1 chord, I have this like scale pattern as well and stuff over there, but also right underneath it is that 4 chord as well. So that's what's really nice about these scale patterns. Again, they're transposable, and it's going to help you understand the major scale for any key across the fretboard. Anyway, so we have the 1 chord and the 4 chord right on top of each other around this very first position of the G major scale. And again, we have position 2, which is built from that second note, which we can make the 2 chord, the A minor chord. But again, right underneath that, we have the 5 chord of our key, which is all around position 2. And again, from position 3, we have this B minor chord, but also underneath that, we have the 6th chord of our key as well, which is going to be E minor. So we can see all in this kind of like spot over here, we now have like all the major and the minor chords inside of our key. We have 1, 4, 5, and we have 2, 3, and 6. All in this kind of spot over here on the fretboard. So it's going to help you find places inside of scales where chords are actually really close to each other. It's going to give you a framework for understanding the major scale across the neck. Again, we have this 4th position over here, which is built from the 4th note in our major scale. And again, we can turn that into the 4 major chord. For G major, that's going to be C major. And we can find this like tritone on the A string where the 7th chord exists. So we can play this F sharp diminished over here on the A string. And again, we go to the 5th position. We have this 5th chord that's built from the low E string here. And then the 1 chord exists on the A string right underneath it. Again, on the 6th position, this is where our relative minor key happens. So this is the E minor chord, the 6th chord in our key. We get this minor scale and stuff from there. But also right underneath that, we get the 2 chord of our key on the A string. And again, finally from this like F sharp diminished over here, we have that kind of like scale position. And also right underneath that on the A string, we have the 3 chord of our key, which is going to be B minor in the key of G. So hypothetically, let's say I had a chord progression that was just like 1 to 4. Let's make it sound more interesting. We're going to turn these into major 7 chords. So that would be like G major 7. And then to C major 7. I can use these scale positions and I can choose those notes to play like little fills in between those chords that are going to work diatonically inside that key signature. Again, these chords and these notes, they come from the major scale, which is what creates our key. So when I combine all of them together, I know they're always going to sound good. So I could play like... Again, I'm just kind of using notes inside of those scale patterns over there. You could use those notes all the way over the neck if you wanted, right? Again, these are all just 7 notes repeating themselves. And learning these scale shapes across the neck are going to help you understand how to play through chord changes and play notes that sound nice over the top of chords inside of a key signature. You might be thinking, okay, that's kind of cool. I get it. We can play some cool stuff over chords now. But what about my pentatonic scales? I don't want to have to lose them. Again, we don't have to forget about pentatonic scales. They actually come from your major key signature. So let's look at how we can fit a pentatonic scale over the top of each of these positions as well. So for all of the major chords in your key, again, we have the 1 chord over here, which lines up with position 1. And we have the 4 chord of our key over here, which lines up with position 4. And again, we got the 5 chord, which coincidentally, obviously lines up with position 5. So for each of those positions, we can actually overlap a pentatonic scale shape on the top of them as well. So we have this G major pentatonic scale shape, which we can play from that chord, and also play this first position of the G major scale as well around it. So we can kind of like flow between these now. We can use both of them at the same time. And again, you can do that with the 4 chord of your key. Play this major pentatonic over the top. And also mess around with that 4th position. With the G major scale. Combine the C major pentatonic with the 4th position of the G major scale. And again, we have the major chord over here. We can play a pentatonic from this D major as well. So combine the 5th position of the G major scale with that D major pentatonic. And again, the reason for that is like it's built, this 5th position is built from the D major chord, the 5 chord of your key. So we can use that D major pentatonic around the scale shape as well. Again, the exact same stuff can be done for the minor chords in your key as well. So let's look at like the 2 chord over here. We have the 2nd position. And again, we can fit a pentatonic shape, this nice box, right over the top of that as well. So combine the minor pentatonic for A minor with the 2nd position of the G major scale. So now you can combine both of them together. You don't have to lose out on your pentatonic. So you can see that they actually are hiding inside of your key signature. Again, we can do this for the other minor chords as well. So we have B minor, we have this 3rd position, and that kind of stuff over there. Again, we can fit this B minor pentatonic box inside of there as well and combine that with like with that 3rd position of the G major scale. And again, we have the E minor chord, which is around position 6, and we can fit this E minor pentatonic around that position as well, which gives us like that natural minor sounding scale. Again, I'm kind of just like sloppily going through all these pentatonics over here. I'm not trying to make some groundbreaking music, but I'm trying to show you how they kind of relate into these key signatures right here. They overlap, right? They're not separate from each other. It's not like you're either playing the major scale or the pentatonics. The pentatonics come from the major scale. They're hiding inside there. Now, the reason why this is happening, we first have to look at the notes inside the G major scale to understand this. So the G major scale contains the notes G, A, B, C, D, E, and F sharp. Just 7 notes, right? As long as we're using those 7 notes, we're going to be playing inside of the G major key, right? It's going to sound diatonic. If we look at the notes of like the A minor pentatonic, for example, we get the notes A, C, D, E, and G. Now, if we go back to G major, we can see those same 5 notes are in that key of G major. They're 5 notes from the G major scale. So since the pentatonic is just a selection of notes from the full major scale, you can combine both of these together in endless ways, and they're going to fit inside of your key signature. It's not like you're going to be playing any wrong notes. Again, this is why like genres like blues, rock, and other styles that use a lot of pentatonics, they're using the pentatonics to simplify things a bit, right? Again, they're simplifying the full scale by only using 5 notes instead of 7, but they're still playing inside of a key signature. I think the problem we have as intermediates is that we understand these pentatonic shapes, but we don't get why those notes come from a key signature or how they relate to it. And again, by understanding the framework of the major scale, it's going to help you play these pentatonic shapes and find chords that you can add over the top of them and make everything sound nice and musical. So with that in mind, how do we kind of like jam out and improvise with these pentatonics and combine the major scale together? So let's look at position 2, which is kind of like over this 2nd chord in our key, this minor chord. I can also play this pentatonic from here as well, right? You've still got all your pentatonic licks that you can use around the spot. Over that 2nd chord in your key. Now again, if I remember what I talked about earlier, again, we have all these kind of chords in close proximity around as well. So let's say I turn these chords into like just power chords instead of full bar chords. So I have my 5 chord here, my 4 chord, my 2 chord, my 1 chord, like my 3 chord and stuff like that. I can like jam out and riff around with like these. Again, like I'm not trying to make any groundbreaking music here, but I'm showing you like this is how people are writing songs. This is how people use the pentatonics to make music, right? They understand how it relates to their key signature, which shows them what chords they can use with those pentatonic scales as well. Again, this is how like the greatest guitarists are using these pentatonics and weaving them inside of like major scale melodies as well, and chords inside of a key signature. You need to understand the major scale and use it as a framework in which everything else in your guitar playing sits on top of. If you want to go even deeper into your key signature and learn where every single triad shape connects on top of the major scale, you're going to want to check out my triad masterclass. It's a great way to support the channel, and I think an even better way to actually learn and improve on the instrument as well. So in my opinion, it's a win-win for both of us. You can check out the results that some of my students have managed to achieve after taking this masterclass from this video over here.